when it comes to entrepreneurialism and innovation of, there's a peak performance involves a lot of aspects. Without doubt, the ultramarathon background helped me as I launched a business like Sage Stone. But it also hurt me in a way.
Really?
Because the ultramarathoning shaped me to have a worldview that anything can be accomplished with determination and brute force and determination and just like keep at it and just plow through it. And then in many ways, that's the magic of an entrepreneur starting a business. You need that aspect, but you also need to be able to like step back and say, determination is not enough. And that's
Need some elegance behind it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I wish I had
Finesse.
more insight into that back when I'd done Sage Stone, but it takes more brute force plus finesse and kind of equal doses for innovation.
Yeah. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Spencer Covey Show. Today we have Alison Keutgen and Keith Brophy and Milo, the puppy. And we're just here hanging out, talking about the future and what it might hold for us. Alison and Keith and I have all worked together and are here now back reunited to talk about the future. So, ladies first, what are some of the things you're researching these days or looking into?
I'm super intrigued still with Quantified Self.
Quantified Self, yeah.
And how that is evolving and how all of our data and healthcare innovation and all sorts of things will be able to be triangulated into value-added, patient or consumer insights.
Mm-hmm. Is that more than monetized, you mean?
Yeah, I'm looking at it from our point of view. What can I be learning about myself? But yes, there'll be a lot of monetization going on.
Yeah, and I think we've mentioned it before, but one of the big things with the Affordable Care Act was getting those patient records not monetized. That is what I meant. Digitized. That before they were all paper records, and I don't know that the ACA really got its just due for that one single thing, getting them digitized. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so we'll Quantified Self, Keith. What's the top thing you're researching these days?
Well, there's so much going on in the world today that it's hard to narrow it to just a couple areas of research. But areas of high interest certainly include the rapid transformation of healthcare due to these emerging, sometimes disruptive, sometimes extending digital health models. My current focus professionally is serving as Chief Operating Officer at ADHD Online.
Yeah, so you're really seeing it.
We are on the leading edge of a new and better way to reach patients while still complementing and extending what traditional healthcare has to offer, bringing the best of that forward. So it's an exciting time in healthcare, and I'm also really interested in areas, a wide range of automation, convergence that encompasses artificial intelligence, the autonomous vehicle era that I hope we get to talk about a bit because it's largely underestimated, and all the ripple effects that's going to have across everything.
Yeah. And, one of the things that I've, been thinking about a lot is how how all these trends are going to be easily combined through quantum computers too. Like if you take, and that's not even close to being ready yet, but you got this huge power brain technology on its way that it could link them all together so easily.
Right. And, and it's interesting timing with the evolution of quantum computing because Moore's law, which I know you're both very familiar with, the increase in computing power and the curve of that increase is still continuing strong. Some experts say it's starting to peter off, and some say nope, there's a lot more life in Moore's law. in terms
It
of
hasn't failed yet.
no, the chips that power the software that power the world, getting better, faster, cheaper, stronger, and then comes quantum computing. So
Yeah.
especially as we look, 10 years, 20 years ahead, there's amazing and somewhat scary transformation coming at us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then you've got the, artificial intelligence. And if you have artificial intelligence run by a quantum computer and autonomous vehicles and everything else, I mean, that's a real distant but yet right present future. I mean, that's going to be a whole different world.
Well, it's interesting to also think about the poles of that, right? I think we can sit around and we're pretty good people. We like to think about the positives
Sure.
that it can impact. We also can't forget about potential negatives too. So it's interesting just to think about the swing that could potentially pose.
Yeah, and what are some versions that you can think of?
Well, autonomous vehicles, one of my versions I hope actually does happen is that it's a mainstream, and that would allow an expanded distance for employment opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
A day where if you want to live in Grand Rapids but work in Chicago or Detroit, you can still make it to the office, but you're working while you're doing it.
Yeah.
And just optimizing that day a little bit better, but also expanding, companies' ability to recruit talent and still keep a somewhat positive work-life balance potentially, depending on what you're looking for.
Yeah, because with everything that's going on, people have really kind of doubled down on the home life.
Mm-hmm.
But Keith, I mean, you've got basically a self-driving car. How's it changed your life?
I do. I have there's other technical terms for the level of autonomous capability, but I call it a slightly autonomous vehicle. And, if you're on a highway, you don't have to touch the steering wheel, nor the gas pedal, nor brake. And this car uses a feature from GM called Super Cruise. But there's a camera on the wheel, and it watches you, and that's how they got approval to allow hands-free driving. But it's been revolutionary. I got it a few years ago when I was stepping into a role where I would have to commute back and forth frequently to Detroit. And I knew to make that Grand Rapids to Detroit commute of a couple hours where I'd often be navigating traffic jams, I knew I just didn't want to do it unless it was a relaxing experience. And sure enough, the Super Cruise enabled vehicle allowed that commute back and forth to be no penalty at all. I came away refreshed from the drive. I didn't have to do anything except monitor, which you're required to do, and relax going through the roughest of stop and go Detroit traffic jams. And another interesting example is when my wife Sheila and I a while back decided, kind of spur of the moment, to go to Arizona and go to Sedona. We have a place in Sedona, and go to visit our Sedona place on short notice. We hopped in the car. Almost all of that trip was highway, which meant almost all of that trip required no interaction. And again, it does still require responsible monitoring.
Yeah, it's got that camera looking at you.
But the cameras are watching you to make sure you're watching what's ahead.
Yeah.
But the difference in the experience, it's the difference of driving in a car that drains you and makes you tired versus sitting on your living room couch as it goes across the nation. You come across relaxed and invigorated. And I have, I've talked a lot with fellow thought leaders like both of you and many others about what the future holds for autonomous vehicles. I should mention I also occasionally co-teach a class in emerging trends for the executive MBA program at GVSU Seidman, and I co-teach that with Dean Lawson. It's a great class because we talk about what's ahead.
Yeah.
But whether talking with friends, colleagues, students, I believe there's a significant underestimation of the way that this kind of technology is going to transform our lives. Seems like everybody knows somebody that has a Tesla, and yeah, it's cool. But what's underestimated is it changes the very nature of getting from point A to point B. So, would you want a weekend cottage in the Upper Peninsula right now if you live in Grand Rapids? Well, it's quite a commitment, and probably not. Probably for most of us that's too far of a haul. But fast forward 10 years, when you can basically like get in your car and do the equivalent of stretching out and taking a nap or doing yoga or catching up on your work, it may be irrelevant whether it's an hour away or 8 hours away. So there's so many ripple effects to the autonomous era that's coming at us, and I would say a lot of opportunity because most of society is still underestimating the impact of how much everything will change, the new paradigms that are just around the corner. 5 years, 10 years, certainly 15 years.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
What's the longest stretch of road? Like, what's the longest you went without doing anything in the car?
Probably on this Arizona trip, I think it took us 24 hours to get there, and we stopped, I think, twice for gas. But because it was all highway, and we went at a time where it wasn't very busy on the highway, there's certainly been periods of 6 hours without touching steering wheel or gas pedal.
Nice.
Does it actually let you go maybe 5 over or so, or?
How strict is the?
How? I think I need a little bit more detail on this.
So this is how it works. And again, this is what's interesting about this is old technology. This car was available. I bought it in 2018. It's even interesting kind of how I got it, because I'd done my research. I was thinking I wanted a Tesla, but then I came across Super Cruise is available on some GM Cadillac models, and I talked to a Cadillac dealer, but they said, we just don't have those. But then they gave me a shout, and they said, we have one for the duration of the auto show in Grand Rapids. It's going to be an exhibit at the show, so it's moved to our books essentially. So there's a 1 week window if you want it. We're kind of by this fluke, we have one of these rare birds, and I jumped on it and bought it during that week. But so it's old technology. They have a much more enhanced version of this technology, Super Cruise now, on even newer cars. And I would love to get one of these newer cars, but with the supply chain issues, I've not figured out how to, even though they're on the market, I've not figured out how to actually obtain one. But the way even the old technology works is you get on the highway, button shows up on your dash that indicates you can go into Super Cruise. You set the maximum speed that you want the car to go at, which if you're conscientious will be the speed limit. You set it for 70 or 80 or 85, and boom, and then the car takes over. And initially when I obtained the car in 2018, it couldn't navigate the S-curve very well. It tried, but I'd be driving through the S-curve sitting back with my hands poised, and it'd be a little jerky, so I'd get a little scared, and it's easy to intercede and take over, and I'd take over. But then over time, and probably inspired by the data that I was generating, because there weren't too many of these cars around. At one point, I read an article about the number of Super Cruise vehicles and the miles driven, and I was commuting back and forth to Detroit, and it talked about how they were like shaping the technology. So this is not an official statement on behalf of the company, but I read this article about all the miles that had shaped Super Cruise, and I had driven 1% on my vehicle. So as an early adopter, early pioneer, my driving patterns with Super Cruise, I think, helped to shape, including smoothing the S-curve navigation. So now when I drive to the S-curve, I can go through the S-curve at the speed limit, 55. I usually get in that middle lane, no hands. I stay very alert. I keep poised, because a lot of people drive wacky through the S-curve. And the car smoothly goes around the S-curve of Grand Rapids. So the point being of all of that, I believe, is this technology is coming a lot faster than most think, and it's way more transformative in terms of possibilities of everything from commute to how you perceive location. I think it's a big deal.
Yeah, and even if you're at 1%, like you probably did 30% of the S-curve computations or something like that,
Right.
At least,
or
yes.
something like that.
Yeah.
So now, Alison, you're a competitive speeder.
Nah, well, it
Or
depends,
track,
I guess.
time trials more.
Yes.
But go ahead and let's hear a little bit more about what I'm talking about for the fans.
I do enjoy motorcycles.
Yeah.
I do enjoy track riding, so not racing, though it may look somewhat similar. To us, it doesn't look similar, but to
But you're
people
going
who aren't
fast
familiar, maybe it looks similar.
On a bike on a track.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're just kind of doing more like time trials.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
But
Yep.
how fast are you going though?
This current motorcycle that I have, I don't actually have a speedometer.
Say what?
So, and you're honestly not focused on that,
Okay.
right? A lot of times people who are tracking speed are tracking lap times, and they have a sensor, and there's a sensor out by the start line. And so they capture that, every lap, and then they can look back to see how things went. I wouldn't say that I'm to the point where I want to care about that quite yet.
Okay.
I thought about going, starting to race at one point a few years ago, and then moved away from it. So I just like to have fun, and it's a really wonderful community, and you get to, it's almost like active meditation, right? I mean,
Yeah, you
you're
gotta be
so
focused,
and
right?
it's so technical, and I'm always working with a coach and always getting feedback and always, trying different things to improve my own efficiency. And of course, I know ultimately lap time, even though I'm not tracking it, but.
What have you learned about yourself through this like journey of speed?
That's a really great question.
Thanks.
I think that I appreciate meditation in an active form. I think, I'm probably like a lot of people where it's, you roll around to the new year every year, and we have busy, active lives, and we're driven. We like to, kind of get after it. But you start to realize that takes a toll. And so thinking about, okay, I need to learn how to meditate. Like, I can do 10 minutes a day. Who doesn't have 10 minutes a day, right? And then, of course, it never happens. But this really does have the same effect. You get a little shot of adrenaline along with it.
Okay.
And I think that's the other thing I've learned, where I think a lot of people look at me and think that my risk profile is off the charts, right? I look at me and say, no way, half the time I'm scared out of my mind, and and
but you're doing it.
But you're doing it, right? And so there's also an element of realizing that you can persevere through things and challenges and less than ideal situations with other motorcycles, and all of that. You're just actively problem solving as you go. So
Keeping calm under pressure.
Yeah, you have to learn that. I think the most difficult thing about it is that you have to learn how to override your natural instincts. Like, you have to learn protocols to make sure that you respond properly when a negative situation happens.
Okay.
Because if you kind of, your natural instinct or your knee-jerk reaction kicks in, a lot of times that's where bigger problems come. So
how do you do that? Like, you can't do it without it happening. So
well, yes, so it does happen. I guess I do meditate then, because between sessions I'll be thinking about things, or if I had a minor episode, sometimes I'll get with a coach and say, hey, this is what happened, this is what I did, is there a better way, what should I be training my brain, and thinking about, and I'll go back to the pit wherever my bike is, right, and sit down and kind of think through that a little bit more and think through the muscle memory of it.
That's really cool. Keith was mentioning on the last podcast how it gets a lot quieter when you're doing, very
Yeah.
intense activities, and
Yep.
it's, for me, it's sailing.
Yes.
I notice that my brain turns off in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You also have to be focused with sailing.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
To me, that seems like a lot of work.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it definitely is when you're turning. if you're going straight, it's not
Walk
so
me
much.
through a turn.
Well, it's either going to be a tack or a jibe the jib. And it depends on if the wind's coming across the bow or if it's coming from behind you. And basically what happens is that you have if it's coming from in front of you, you've got a sail coming off to the side, spinnaker, or not a spinnaker, or a jib usually, and then a mainsail. And with the jib, which is kind of that second sail, the one that kind of like goes to the front, you have it tied down on a block behind you, which is like a turning block, a circle, big metal circular turning block. What you have to do is let that loose, and at the same time, the helmsperson has to turn the boat into the other channel of wind, basically. And what that does is it flips the sail over, and then you need somebody on the other side to pull in the line to retighten it. And then you're kind of like,
Tacking.
you're tacking with the wind coming at you. It's basically the same process if the wind's coming behind you, but then usually you've got the big poofy sail that kind of looks like a hot air balloon. It's called a spinnaker. And in that case, whenever I sail, there's a spinnaker pole holding the corner out, like where you want it, and then the other side's held down by another line, and then what you have to do is bring the pole from one side down under the sail, clip it onto the other side, and then somebody in the back's pulling that other line tight. And so the same thing happens with the spinnaker. It kind of just moves over to the side, and then the boat moves to the side.
Wow. You really don't have any time to think about anything other than what you're doing.
Yeah, everybody has one job. If you're racing, everybody has one job, and you have to be really good at it, and there's still room for danger no matter what.
To extrapolate that into a future trend, which you asked us about.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest frontiers that's going to start to be conquered in the next decade or so, then it will unfold over the next couple of decades, is the human brain.
Oh, yeah.
We're just at the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
But as you each talk about your activities, and I know we've talked before about a lifelong pursuit of mine from really starting in my late teens and up to this slightly later stage in life, has been running ultra marathons, 100-mile races, 50-mile races. But we're describing them kind of the sailing or the biking or the running kind of the same way. It's, Alison, it struck me, you said meditative. Running 100 miles, the world disappears except for what you're focused on. You get so in the groove. It's so meditative. And all of our deep pursuits have that in common, deeply meditative, which we know equates to, is not a magic answer by itself, but when you can be deeply meditative through an activity, equates to healthier life, healthier brain. It just so happens that your activity sounds like a lot of work. Your activity does sound scary. Mine lasts a long time and requires just grueling intensity. But at the core, it's this: the world kind of fades away and you get lost in this deeply meditative focus. And someday we'll understand more about the brain, how it works, how to enhance that, and maybe it'll be possible more for an average person that's not immersed in such cool activities to still get some of the deeper benefits that come with an immersive activity.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to understand how you can tolerate the pain cave for that long.
Yeah.
Well,
for
Maybe
a whole
that's
day.
A future insight that for a whole day,
Yeah,
going through all of the stages of grief, I'm sure, in some regard, or maybe ultras have their own stages of grief and process. I know there's plenty of marathon memes out there that kind of joke, and poke fun at what those feelings are like.
I think what's often missed about the ultra marathons, the pain cave is a good
Yeah.
question, because in a 5K, the pain you're experiencing, I would draw it as a straight line up. Like, by the time you get to 2.6 miles of a 3.1 mile, you're hurting.
Right.
And ultra marathon is kind of fascinating because it goes up, but like a roller coaster, up and down and up and down. And it's possible 80 miles into a 100-mile race to have the most thrilling and exhilarating experience of your life for 6-7 miles. You get in these like bursts or grooves, but it's possible, and I've been there, to be at 23 miles of a 100-mile race and feel so miserable you can't conceive of going more than like 3 steps on, and then you just break it down to a step at a time. But it's ups and downs, and which also kind of maps to the bigger experience of life in a way.
Which is interesting because, how much has that influenced how you solve problems elsewhere in life, right? Or even at work, leading teams through innovation challenges. Sometimes it's this big thing in front of you and you're trying to figure out how to get to point A to Z, and there's no road for it.
Yeah.
And you have to learn how to be iterative through that.
Right.
Take one step at a time, no matter if it's up, down, sideways, or painful.
Yeah, it's a good underscore of when it comes to entrepreneurialism and innovation of, there's a peak performance involves a lot of aspects. Without doubt, the ultramarathon background helped me as I launched a business like Sage Stone. But it also hurt me in a way.
Really?
Because the ultramarathoning shaped me to have a worldview that anything can be accomplished with determination and brute force and determination and just like keep at it and just plow through it. And then in many ways, that's the magic of an entrepreneur starting a business. You need that aspect, but you also need to be able to step back and say, determination is not enough. And that's
Needs some elegance behind it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I wish I had
Finesse.
more insight into that back when I'd done Sage Stone, but it takes more brute force plus finesse and kind of equal doses for innovation.
Yeah. It's when you're talking about like step by step, because there's so much in life that's step by step. This is a good segue, perhaps. I think that the next step that we're going through right now as a society, as far as like revolutionary stuff right in front of us, I think it's mainly the crypto and the blockchain space.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting shaped, whether we like it or not. We're getting shaped by that technology, like right now.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The rest of the world is too.
Yeah.
And I kind of, right now the countries don't really know what to do with it, but I think that a lot of what they don't know what to do with is how to work it into the current system. And I'm kind of like riffing here a little bit, but when we were doing telehealth a lot, one of their problems is that they were trying to get the telehealth model to fit into the normal model, and the two aren't the same. It's an evolution.
Right.
You can't get this new thing necessarily to fit into this old paradigm of like stability and consistency and everything.
Yeah.
You've got this new wild thing that's kind of creating itself in a way.
Yeah.
It's like all the entrepreneurs in the space that I research, they're all kind of playing off each other. Like one person's filling in the gaps for the other one, and I just, and so what my point is that it seems like the governments are all kind of trying to figure it out, but it seems like inevitable that we're all going to be working with digital currencies here in whatever form they take. Digital currencies.
You hit on two amazing things I want to get your thoughts on. But telehealth, let's return to. But on the cryptocurrency front, I've gotten really, really, really deep into that. Even back when I was state director of the SBDC, blockchain and things were emerging, and I've tried to talk. I've studied. I've talked to lots of smart people. I think I have a decent awareness. I do think it's going to change the world, no doubt. That combination of technologies, digital currency, blockchain, which can be applied to so many things beyond digital currency and beyond. It's interesting as one tries to navigate that because there's so much smoke. I can't even keep track of how many friends and colleagues have told me they're multimillionaires because of crypto. But then you talk a little bit more like, well, I could have been a multimillionaire. And I don't know if you guys are mega multimillionaires yet from crypto, but there's so much excitement and enthusiasm and hype about it. But I think like many other technology advancements, as the dust settles, it's not going to be that person in their basement makes a smart cryptocurrency buy and gets 100 million in a month. Like, that's not going to be the story. The story is going to be smart businesses with massive teams of smart people and contractors blocking and tackling and incrementally leverage and benefit from cryptocurrencies. So I think it will transform. The governments will lead the way and incrementally opening gates for cryptocurrency. Large enterprises will dominate using it smartly. And in the days where like a basement cryptocurrency investor makes it big will be kind of a blip on the horizon. But I'm curious on both of your thoughts, and no offense to either of you if you have already made 100 million in cryptocurrency.
99, just 99. Still working on that zero. Well, I'll let you answer that first. I've got an answer, I think, of sorts, but
you go ahead.
Go ahead. I think that what we're going to see, at least in the near term, is that NFTs are going to become more of the point. I think thus far it's been like the coins and the tokens, like Ethereum, Bitcoin being coins, and like Shiba Inu being a token. You've got these basic, the mainstays, and then these little spurs of sorts. And I think that that's what most people are focused on and talking about right now. But like, for instance, somebody makes a bunch of money on Ethereum. Well, why? Well, it's because OpenSea's NFT platform's taken off. That's what, people are spending money on the mining things. So there's more miners. So, there's more power, and then people are investing. And I think what we're going to see is more technologies such as NFTs, or even like a more user-friendly version of those that utilize the blockchain for essentially like continuance, like, because I think it's so core to people's just foundational thinking as to set up a legacy, essentially. And as long as we can keep the electricity on, NFTs and crypto and the internet, being the electricity, you can, I'm sure you've seen this already. You've got musicians and artists and whatnot putting up like a batch of 10,000 NFTs, but then the secret is that they get residuals that hold forever.
Right.
Yeah. Did you see the buzz over? I think it was over this last week. There's a little bit of buzz that some artists were buying their own NFTs to pump up the prices.
Yeah. Well, if it works, I mean, the market will level it out eventually.
Yeah.
I think it was Meek Mill or some rapper. I forget who it was, but they released, their album. It's like, and then they got $1 million. It's like, I forget how much dollars that equated to, but in a matter of minutes they got $1 million, and now that's essentially like a master, and now forever they're gonna get like a little 10% or whatever whenever that song resells.
Yeah.
And I just, like the cars, for instance, are like, there was some talk about, what was it, like, I don't want to get it wrong. There was one auto manufacturer that was going to charge for heated seats. Remember hearing about that?
Yeah.
It's a subscription basis kind of thing.
Okay.
And they turned it off once they got the media backlash. But for a second there, you had an extra option in the app for like $20 a month for heated seats. It didn't do anything to the hardware of the car.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, honestly, that just makes me think about what was the research that pointed to that being a
or lack thereof.
You know
right,
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, sometimes I'm surprised that maybe the lack thereof that's occurring.
Yeah, but when you look at it, I think artistic individuals are capitalizing on it. But what happens when businesses catch wind of this?
Yeah.
And like, you release this thing that you made into a peer-to-peer network, and you kind of don't need to have so much control over it because you can rest assured you'll get residuals for whatever happens. So like maybe if Adobe was created today, it could put out its, you know, Photoshop program for $10 a piece, knowing that they're only putting out 10,000 copies or whatnot, or 100,000 or whatever. And then like, as people didn't need it anymore, they resold it, and they could get a cut for the next person buying that license. I just use that as an example.
Yeah.
It's
you
just,
know?
it's interesting, the full circle, right? On the musician and the artist front,
Yeah.
you went from super solid industry, right? Back in our, well, maybe
They
not
were
super
making
solid.
money.
They were making money.
Some people
right?
were
Like,
making money, yeah.
there was a model there.
Yeah, there was a
Streaming,
model there.
which has been a bit of a, you know, choppy road from an
Yeah.
artist perspective, but functional, clearly. And now back to maybe something that manages or meets their original expectations a little bit better.
Well,
Which-
yeah.
and that's really what it's about, right? Expectations.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, the music marketing engine, I think, was basically built on a society based on scarcity.
Right.
You couldn't market your own music to
Right.
to whom, to how.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. You had to have a label.
Yeah.
You had to have a label, and now that we've got these different platforms that are being adopted in mass, you know, people are able to do this peer-to-peer networking all of a sudden, and you don't need the label. Although I'm sure there's still benefits for some, but
Yeah.
It's been really interesting to see the number of leading artists, you know, many of them late in their career, that have sold their catalogs.
yeah,
Right.
Steve, it probably doesn't show on the video, but on the podcast, but Stevie Nicks is playing in the background.
Let's hope not.
Background music, but she's sold her catalog for a lot of money, as did, you know, a number of other rockers. But then you wonder if that's just a transition state, that because it seems like that will be supplanted by NFTs quite quickly.
seems like it. Yeah, and whether the artists themselves figure it out or if that's what the label now does, and then there's just a different cut figured out, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's changing. I mean, quick. You know, there's all that hype about digital real estate,
Right.
but there's nothing stopping people from listing their real estate in an NFT and then saying that you get 5% forever, or 3% or whatever the number is.
Yeah.
You know, because you built it, so now I get 10% forever with every transaction.
Right.
Could you imagine?
That's
The real estate market does not work like that right now at all. Cars too, for that. Anything really, anything that needs like a title. You know, you can now, if you wanted to, and people were up for it, you could get a commission yourself in perpetuity for having it at one point.
yeah.
And if you're the creator, then it's that much better for you. Are you seeing any advanced technologies in like advanced motorsports coming through?
Electric is definitely something that has come in. I don't know about more aggressively than people thought, maybe more aggressively than I personally thought, just because I'm someone who does like the sound,
Oh,
right?
sure. I've
Does
heard
like
this
the
before,
feeling.
yeah.
However, the electric side brings in a lot more torque and has a plethora of other performance enhancements as well. But there's definitely more leagues or sections of leagues to have an E-Series. I always think about the impressive work of Ewan McGregor and Charlie. I actually don't remember his last name. If you've ever seen Long Way Round, Long Way Down, and now they did A Long Way Up, and Long Way Up was Patagonia to LA on motorcycles.
Oh, neat.
But they did it all electric.
Oh.
And so they brought in their chase vehicles with Rivian, like at their inception almost.
Yeah.
And they were struggling finding e-bikes at that time that could hold a charge to give them the miles that they would need to do every day. They ended up going with Harley Davidson, if I remember correctly, who essentially turned around prototype bikes in like 10 weeks.
Whoa.
And
that
now
seems
you look
fast.
at, I mean, and that was in the recent couple of years ago, right? And now
Yeah.
you look at where's Rivian right now? You know, they've received some hefty investment and they're kind of off to the races. and so are a lot of the other electric bikes. So, yeah.
Do you? I wonder though if you think about the electric motoring experience.
Yeah.
If you think what we deem as connecting and cool today might shift. My car has 3 modes. There's touring mode, which is kind of normal. There's snow mode, which makes some shifts in how it performs, and then there's sporty mode, sports mode, and then it handles a little bit more like a performance sports car.
Yeah.
But they're kind of, to some degree, they're simulating that experience. And with electric vehicles, like initially I would think you'd be able to push a button and it can simulate what you would experience with a combustion engine,
Yeah.
and the sound and the rattle and the gear shifts and everything else. But I wonder if and I like that feel too, with on a far less daredevil scale than you, Alison. But I like that feel too of a performance vehicle. But I wonder if we're all conditioned to it because of these influences that we grew up and started driving, and that roar of like pushing the gas
Nostalgic.
down. And if 15 years out, what is stimulating is like, I can floor it and it's smooth as can be without a sound. Like,
Yep.
is this a temporary state where, because back to the adoption of autonomous vehicles, even, which they don't have to be electric, but a lot of the wave coming is electric. But that's one thing that's out there a lot, is people enjoy driving, but we're conditioned to enjoy a certain experience of driving generationally. But the next generation, especially with the next generation, as a generalization, is grounded in a heavy concern for the environment and other factors.
Right.
They might really be valuing, I can push the pedal down, I hear no sound, and it's smooth, and I don't have any perception of shifting gears. And so I'm curious on what you think about that shift, even among the daredevil racers like yourself.
Yeah.
Well, I don't race.
Yes,
but
yes, you corrected us on that
track
earlier.
ride. Enthusiast, we'll say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think as the technology advances, it'll be easier to get people to adapt to it. I think about my street bike, which actually has a rain mode, sport mode, touring mode, and it's they're all very different, right? Kind of similar to the car, but I'm not a super fan of it yet, right? It doesn't have the responsiveness that I always want, unless you're always in sport mode, and then that's quite a bit better, which I usually am. But there's still, a little play there. So I think as performance increases, and when you think about, I don't actually know what all the attributes are, how a motorcycle, how Yamaha, right, would break down their consumer attributes and how they get prioritized. I know performance is always going to be at the top, right? And so right now, I mean, a lot of motorcycles aren't too far off anyways. Like, we have the same electronics, right? You look at some of the race bikes out there, and they will just about fly you to the moon, right?
Yeah, right, yeah.
I mean, they go, and there's a lot of computer, work that goes into that, and there's a lot of sensors, and there's a lot of things. So as we get a little bit closer to that, I think it'll be more broadly accepted and desired, really, is what, you would need.
Yeah.
And it will be interesting, to your point, on the younger generations coming in, if that's just something they just start with,
Right.
at what point, in that teeter-totter, do they just go, I'm doing electric?
Because some of the emerging younger generation, soon there'll be a whole generation that never, ever experiences driving with hands on the steering wheel and feet on the gas and brake.
Right. Which is kind of wild to think about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, back in the horse buggy days, it's like, well, I mean, like, when cars came across, like, horses were way better.
Yeah.
It's way better to be in a carriage and have a horse take you to where you want to go. And when cars come into place, I mean, you can go anywhere you want to go, and you don't have a horse getting hungry. You just got to feed your car with gas. But
I have to share the coolest story that's little known, but was a big advance in cars getting adopted, because just that you described it exactly on point, Spencer. Like, cars came out, but horses were still more reliable.
Yeah.
And there's still a much better way in many respects for transporting yourself. But in some of the major metro areas, including New York City, that were very congested. The problem was the horse manure in the streets is it got more and more crowded, more and more people pile up so much. Even with around-the-clock cleaning crews, they could not remove all of the horse poop from the streets. And that's what finally was the tipping point, or at least one of the major tipping points in the adaptation of the car. You know, first it came in these major metro areas because cars did not emit poop on the streets. Horses did, and it had risen to a crisis commerce blocking issue. And that's like lost in the history of how cars gained momentum. But you're right, they were an inferior technology to the horse until poop started to shift the game.
I mean, I was just reading some quote, and I'm not even going to try to get it right, but it was saying something about, or take a noble steed down to the, in your carriage.
Right.
It's like, I've never ridden in a horse and buggy. Have you? Have either of you?
Mackinac Island.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah.
Mackinac Island, I think once downtown, like, whatever they do around the block or whatever.
Yeah. But how nice would it be to, like, fresh air, and you're only going, like, pretty slow. I mean, it's not dangerous, I wouldn't say.
Going back to the e-bikes, it's interesting, like, that kind of jogs thought where, one, it's kind of a comical thing, right? Like, that was the influencing factor. And so I could say, well, if I didn't have to plan to stop at the gas station to get premium fuel and fill up, my couple of jugs or whatever it is for the motorcycle on the way to the track day, because it's going to be cheaper than at the track, then am I more likely to always remember to make sure it's charged, right? Does that turn into like an easier process where it's easy when I come back home and I pull the trailer in, I plug it in automatically, so it's just ready to go. And then the convenience, right, of not having to stop and do fuel and, secure to the trailer and all of that is, one of those influencers.
Humans adapt to anything so quickly. I mean, like the stay-at-home, trend that's going on right now. Everybody seems to be getting used to it. I don't think, like.
They do. I was a unique guinea pig on stay-at-home. Is the organization, like companies across the nation, we reverted to stay-at-home mode for the organization I was at, but I was working on some intense activity, so we had nonstop Zoom meetings, sometimes 12 hours a day, plus the kind of Zoom meetings that I had to be engaged. I was leading them or contributing, and I think that it flavors the Zoom experience a lot. If you're in a job role at home and you can show up at your meetings, a few a day, but kind of be in the background, it's one thing. But it was almost like I've been a hard, intense worker my entire life. I love what I'm doing. I loved what I was doing there. But the intensity of the nonstop Zoom was grueling. And eventually I felt, for, just my own personal circumstance, it was like really unsustainable in a sense. So then I hopped over to ADHD Online, where I am now as the chief operating officer. And we're nationwide. We have psychologists and physicians and nurse practitioners across the country. But we have a headquarters with about 40 of us now right here in the Grand Rapids metro area, and with a real office. And we go in, it's real people, and it's an excited culture. It's intense. We're talking all the time and collaborating. And the experience, especially going from one extreme to the other, has been unbelievable.
Oh, I bet.
And it's formed my belief that the total virtual, I know it's almost like accepted in the business world today that, all right, virtual workplace won, like that's it. I don't. It's not true. It's like playing out still. It got accelerated with COVID, and for many people, it's a cool model. You can hang out with your kids in between calls. You can meet your Amazon driver. You can be there when your washer repair person comes. All of things which people started to share freely in that environment. But if you're intensely all in, it's tough.
Yeah.
And I do not believe that remote will win. Hybrid will win. There's such an advantage to human connection that will have to be a part of successful businesses. And then maybe they'll be much more broad on allowing remote and in person. But I bet you 10 years from now we look at it and it's hybrid that wins the day, not remote. But curveballs are things like holographic meetings and like maybe virtual reality meetings. Maybe there's some technologies that shift what hybrid means. But for right now, I would vote on the power of in-person hybrid beating remote.
Yeah.
But that is interesting, right? You bring VR into the mix because, I think with in-person, you actually get the connection, right? You can feel the energy, you can, whatever that is, you can read body language, you can know you're within this close proximity to other humans. Zoom, video conferencing. Right?
What have you.
What have you, is a bit different. I think the initial thought was, oh, it's fine. You just hop on video conference. It's the same thing because you can see the person if they have their video on. And you're a great example that that's not really the case. And it's a whole different level of neural fatigue and exhausting. And then what happens when is virtual reality somewhere in between? What if you popped on your VR goggles and you had a team meeting where you can see the humans, you can, get to the point where it's mimicking body language and you can have that actually
the avatar kind of experience.
Right, an avatar kind of experience where you're replicating the world, even if you're not within the same room. I'm super intrigued with how that's gonna play out or not, right? And you think about metaverse and all these things that are a little bit more on the entertainment and passion side of the fence right now, but moving them into a business application could be super intriguing.
Yeah, I'm kind of stuck on the virtual versus in-person versus hybrid thing, and I kind of want to pose this, I guess, thought to you guys and see what you think, because to me, I think that a lot of people in big companies don't realize, just by the virtue of the job that they're doing, how competitive the context is that they're in.
Yeah.
When you're in these meetings with the folks at the top, it becomes very apparent that nothing's perfect.
Yeah.
Right.
You can have a multi-billion-dollar company that's in an oh shit moment.
Yeah.
No problem. Happens all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that the vast majority of people are kind of shielded from that.
Yeah.
Kind of brutal honesty of what's actually going on.
Yeah.
And so that's to say, I don't know that once people get back to meeting in the office, I think that those teams are going to become so much more productive that the competition factor alone is going to drive people back to the office.
I think you nailed it. The advantage of having a true trusting bond in person, forged in person, is it doesn't matter what the economics of saving money on an office or not. The competitive advantage of having trust and bonding is going to leapfrog remote. And so the successful companies will be those that, even if it's in a hybrid mode, they can leverage in-person trusting teams.
Yeah.
I hope it's a good catalyst for more companies actively taking a position of putting together those high-performing teams, right? I mean, that's something that I think everybody says, well, we all put together high-performing teams.
Of course we do. What other kind of team is there?
Right. Our company is full of them. And depending on the company, depending on the size, depending on so many different factors, a lot of times it's not. You're still looking at it as hiring this very specific skill set. I need someone to do X, Y, and Z, and that's it. And I don't care about the rest as long as they're nice or whatever, have a personality, whatever those softer intangibles are that they think fit culture. But I think we've all experienced what it's really like to build and craft that high-performing team, and then what can be accomplished out of that.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting, and I'm hopeful that, you know, as people settle on, hey, I can find plenty of opportunities that just let me be home versus hybrid versus, you know, that in-person element, maybe that'll allow companies to more surgically build those types of teams and incentivize them appropriately then to come into a hybrid model, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you have the talent, you have whatever system and methodology they use to build a high-performing team. We're going to incentivize you because you can do more. We need less people, right?
Yeah, if that's in the background.
I mean, eventually what I plan on doing, have you heard of this concept called token gating? You've seen it. You might not know the name. It took me forever to figure out this word, token gating, but it's basically what you do if you want to have a pay gate that's accessed by an NFT, and you basically have a website, and then to get into the website you have to connect your wallet to the website, and then it sees that you have an NFT, and then it lets you into the website. That's how Bored Ape Yacht Club and CryptoPunks and whomever, but anybody can do it. It's just called token gating. And I aspire to having that set up to where the idea is essentially release, 10,000 of these computer generated NFTs and sell them for you name it, $5, $10, but it'd be 0.0001 ETH or something that. And then you get an NFT for the show, and then you basically connect your wallet to my website to see the content. But I think it's a little early to be doing that, but that's where I want it to go eventually.
So
I think that's
next month.
Yeah. 3 weeks. Give me 3 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I've already been researching.
You can help me get mine set up.
Yeah, it's not particularly difficult. There's this guy that just I don't know what country it was, but an Indonesian kind of Polynesian country, a guy from there. He took 10,000 pictures of his face, just 10,000 selfies, and he put them online for pretty cheap. He made $1 million.
Really?
Yes. Some of it's just the novelty.
Or passports.
But then also what happens is that
how is it where's that going? Where's the black market fit into all this, you know?
But then the other thing is that it kind of becomes this community where the people that own these face NFTs also have a private Telegram channel or a private website or something, and then they become a community, and then it just kind of it hardly matters the medium, whether it's a picture or a graphic or what have you. It's a lot of it has to do with what happens after it's sold more than what it is.
Right.
Because these communities are for instance, there's this one Shiba Inu there's absolutely no intrinsic value. It doesn't do a thing, but it's just that the community is so strong because I think it's neat, and I don't know if Elon Musk's still their spokesperson or not, but he kind of seems to be, and they've got a charismatic spokesperson, and it's almost just just is what it is, whereas some of them have utility, a lot of them have utility, but not all of them, and at this point it hardly seems to matter. It just kind of is what it is.
Yeah, brave new frontier.
Yeah, and then as they get sold, he still gets a cut of each time they get resold. It's peer-to-peer commerce like nothing we've ever seen. To not only not need a middle person, but then also to not have to trust the other person that you're dealing with. Not only do you not need somebody brokering the deal, but you also don't need to trust the person on the other end. There's plenty of ways to get ripped off, but there's also plenty of ways not to get ripped off that are all brand new. As long as we keep the power on it, they're going to be there.
Yeah.
Super interesting.
So how do you think that, like, let's pull this back to healthcare.
Are you rolling now?
Oh yeah,
You
have
rolling?
been, yeah.
Oh.
Oh, sorry, you're going to have to edit that.
I can edit all of it. Yeah.
We should have had it filming while we had the pizza.
Yeah, that would
Should've.
Yeah.
That's
well,
going to be a whole new generation of podcast.
Yeah.
Behind the curtain.
By the what?
Behind the curtain.
Behind the curtain. Well, that's the thing, because that's where I got on the whole point. Whereas if I had my website already up and token gated and had like a community behind it, I wouldn't have to worry about copyright infringement, because the only people that could get to the other side of it are like paying subscribers.
Right.
And unless YouTube or Stevie Nicks,
Right.
who cares if there's a little music in the background?
Yeah.
Whereas like
Yeah.
right now, you still need that centralized YouTube platform to spread the message, or
Yeah.
however you
Right.
say that, your media.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
But it's already getting to the point where, like, you know, if you have a couple in, like, I think Joe Rogan's kind of done it in a way with Spotify. Like it's pay gated now.
Okay.
Well, you have to have Spotify.
Oh, right.
It's not like you could just log into YouTube for free and, you know, and
But do you have to do the paid version of Spotify?
I don't know. I haven't
Yeah.
watched it on Spotify. I haven't
I
followed
don't
it.
think so,
I
but
haven't moved over to
I
it.
think there's still that pay to have no ad model,
Oh,
you know?
sure. Yeah.
So
Well,
I
I
don't
pay
think you
for
have
no
to-
ads on YouTube. And let me tell you what, it is worth every single dollar. The paid version of YouTube is awesome. And you can get like it's like a family plan. You can get like 5 people on it for like $20 a month and no more ads. And then you can turn off your phone and the YouTube plays like it's Pandora or
Yeah.
SoundCloud or whatever.
Nice.
Yeah, and not only that, but YouTube's music algorithm, I would say, is, if it's not the best, it's right up there with the best. The music, yeah, I like it better than Pandora and Spotify and whatnot.
Nice.
Yeah. So let's go back to like advanced medical technologies. You want to?
Sure.
And like advanced technologies and stuff like that. You know, like, what do you think? Like, so, like, for somebody that's not involved with advanced technologies on a day-to-day basis, you know, what are some things that you think that people are gonna start having happen, you know, in the next year, like this year? What are some things that you see around the corner, like this year? How are we gonna be impacted? Like, what kind of things are gonna, you know, the companies of today are gonna have to deal with, and hurdles?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to make a acknowledgement that we all worked together back in the IdeoMed days. That's where we first crossed paths, as IdeoMed was working to transform digital engagement with chronic conditions and Medicaid populations. You know, so we've all been looking at this for a long time.
Yeah.
And the challenge with healthcare is that change unfolds slowly. So it's a slow plod for what the possibilities are. I think the biggest change we're likely to see this year is just this incremental advancement in the holistic suite of virtual, you know, telehealth offerings. Health systems kind of started in that world by offering kind of scattered pieces, and you can see the movement there more and more coming out with, you know, a clear game plan where the patient can have a true relationship via telehealth across the board, and not just for a spot problem or question. It's significant, I think, that Amazon just announced its telehealth practice over the last week. I think that's pretty big. So I'd say in 2022, the big evolution is what's already been there, telehealth, but we're going to start to see the early beginning of the era of telehealth done right. And of course, this is not a non-biased observation, because ADHD Online is in the arena of mental health telehealth, focusing on ADHD. But by having this patient-centric approach removing barriers to access, focusing on the patient journey. We've just had phenomenal response, and the world has, the nation has shifted to expect more of healthcare, and that includes the ease of access and the focused approach that telehealth can bring. So that's my prediction. Curious what Alison will say.
Well, first, I agree with that. I'm going to move it beyond 2022, though, but not by much.
Okay.
Like, I think the next couple years, it's going to be interesting to see how the access to all of this data is going to continue to manifest. There's a lot of companies that are already well into predictive analytics and mining data and bringing insights out of it. And I think the more, we have EMRs, we talked about that, so that was accomplished. So all of that data is out there. And we already know that the pain point of patients Googling their own results, because now results of any test you do is almost instant, right?
Self-diagnosis.
24 hours, you get them before you talk to your PCP or healthcare professional. And what's the first thing you do? You hop on Google or WebMD and you're plain doctor, and then bringing all your own insights and recommendations back to your PCP. And that's got to be annoying as all get out, right? Because they're the expert. So I think that pain point is also going to drive healthcare organizations, at least hopefully it drives them, to want to figure out how to better mine the data that they have, triangulate it, create better insights, and whether it's roping in some of the AI tech, whether it's roping in other sources like social media from a behavioral aspect. I think that there's an interesting, circle around that.
Yeah, and like, well, we were dealing with chronic conditions, and 80% of the money is spent on chronic conditions, and within that, most of them have comorbidity issues, and we've kind of shined the light on it with COVID lately, with comorbidities being like almost death sentences, or at least very scary.
Right.
But going back to the data side of things, like we've got the technology to passively monitor anybody that's at risk to them, to themselves or others.
Yeah.
But we don't. Not really.
Right.
I mean, they might have to take it upon themselves, but we've had this technology, the connected scales and the blood pressure cuffs and the, you name it. For a while there was some talk about like putting sensors into cars so that you're driving and it's taking your blood pressure to see, what's going on. It's measuring your weight to make sure like you're not, bloating from a heart failure issue, or that's not a thing yet. So when you're talking about data, it seems to be more for like the benefit of the company kind of thing. But I wonder what kind of like future it would be for people to have better access to like self-diagnosis capabilities, because that's kind of what you're saying is that people want to self-diagnose themselves.
They do.
I mean, it'd be super interesting to say, hey, I've been feeling really fatigued for 3 weeks or whatever. And you type that in, and whatever that platform is can pull in, maybe all of the foodie posts you have on Instagram. And maybe is analyzing what's in that, and maybe looking at prior blood work from your EMR, and maybe looking at any other tells, right, that you've given it access to. And it can triangulate that and say, well, did you know your sodium intake has been da-da-da, or your whatever intake has been higher than it should be, trending up. That is a leading cause of whatever this question was, right? Or, here's an insight or a question you can ask your doctor that maybe is a better articulated question that allows the doctor to more, surgically narrow in on what they should be doing or what they should be asking, or, things of that nature. It could almost act as a better bridge of communication as well, I think.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's always kind of like, the problem is that it's left up to the patient that hasn't historically been doing it, a lot of times. and it almost needs to disappear to where it can not be so active.
Yeah.
But
And
then you're dealing with snooping.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
it's a fine line.
Yeah.
I would suggest, I think what you said is right on. I'd suggest even a twist to that, because traditional healthcare is so unprepared to deal with this new era. And, way back in the IdeoMed days, like what, 2012, Spencer, you launched on behalf of IdeoMed the West Michigan Quantified Self group, and was talking about how can someday we collect health data.
Yeah.
2022, a decade later, it's accomplished. Like this, this watch on my wrist collects such rich data that when I go into the health app or the watch app, I don't have time to sift through it all. Like we've reached the golden era of data, but there is, I would say, no doctor I know of, or hardly a doctor in town in all of West Michigan that, if no matter what I go to them with, that will ask me, even if I have this wealth of data. And this data is very predictive, very indicative of my lifestyle, very indicative of trending. It should absolutely already be a central part of many forms of medical assessment, depending on what the reason is you're talking to your doctor. But nobody will ask for it today. It's not, that gulf is still Grand Canyon big between what could be done to provide increased insight into the patient and what traditional healthcare is ready to do.
At a standard fee. Because you can
Right.
get into
Yes.
you can
Right.
get into concierge medicine and pay extra, and they'll look at it all day long.
Yeah.
Good point.
But that's cost
a good
extra.
point.
You know,
Yeah.
if you're at a traditional health system, it's like $5,000 on top of even $1 that you paid in insurance costs, and then you've got like Forward, for instance. And their whole model is based on that predictive analytics, but it's an extra
Well,
X amount of dollars a month.
yeah, they're more of a functional medicine platform. Is that what?
What were you gonna say?
I was thinking back to years ago when you presented at I think it was
Stanford's?
the Stanford MedX conference, and I was out there with you. And the night before your presentation, we were sitting around at the hotel at a bonfire in the patio, and with a number of awesome doctors, young progressive doctors, and we had shared we were from IdeoMed.
Yeah.
But as the bonfire burned on, and some of them had a drink or two maybe, but they were talking pretty freely. But the conversation pivoted to all of the doctors said, if the patient walks in with research they want to ask about or data they gathered on themselves, that they had no interest in that. Like they felt that was diverting from, they wanted to like follow their path of analysis. They didn't want patients to come proactively armed with data. I'm not saying that represents all physicians. I'll probably have some physician friends that watch this. But this was probably 2014, 2015. But they did not want patients coming in, sucking up time with data or research. And they talked pretty openly about it. And to me, that was striking. And that was one of those inklings like, boy, someday we do need that combination of artificial intelligence, which will love the data, supplemented by caring human doctors, because the artificial intelligence can pull in all of the data and synthesize it and queue it up for the human doctor.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting because I wonder, honestly, does a lot of that go back to just the protocols that they're taught, and then especially in the U.S., the liability aspect and medical malpractice and the potential of being suing, and if that, like, they're taught all of that, right? And rightfully so, because they need to protect themselves in their practice and follow good protocols for working with patients. But, it's also a tell of that starts to feel very narrow.
Right.
And then when you have access, and now patients start to have access, and the dollar is shifted more to patients, right? How is that going to need to impact with what the medical bar, or whoever that governing body is, changes the way that they teach protocols and what they guide doctors to do.
And the
Credit,
constraints of insurance provisions, and the health system protocols. Like it's really not even the fault of the doctors, because
Right.
can you imagine a doc that, let's say, sees 30 patients a day, which I know some doctors see that quantity of patients, and all of a sudden they have several patients that come with all of their data. We'll pick back up on this.
What are your thoughts on home health care? Because I think that's one of the areas that I think that I personally, to answer my own question, I think that is going to be a very near term trend. You're going to see, like Amazon. I think they would love to have home health care be their niche, where the delivery driver has a kit that they can swing into your house and take your temperature, essentially.
Right.
Ish.
I think that would be an interesting thing, though, to go back to how can you supplement the care with certain sensors and in different forms, right? Like, who's to say that the chair you're sitting in couldn't have something in it that, your favorite chair to read in or what have you is also going to provide some of that data back to the home health organization that has the nurse dropping in twice a week or every day, whatever that case is. I think that there's an opportunity there. We haven't seen that widely spread yet. And so, like anything in healthcare, there's a lot of influencing factors to get that done. But it seems like a closer term, value add that could potentially actually get executed at some point.
Because you're really when you're talking about spend, you're dealing with people who have unmanaged chronic conditions. They're out of control for the most part.
Or age, right? Age related, trying
sure.
to keep elderly in their homes as long as possible. And,
Yeah.
there's definitely a significant, I don't have data to back this up, but thinking about personal experiences and even walking through rehab centers that are largely filled with elderly people that have taken a fall or needed a hip replacement. And, there's some that are really great and successful, and there are a lot of challenges with actually ever getting those individuals back into their home or assisted living or where they were prior to that episode, and how do you make that transition actually feasible and then support it, right? And then moving forward, support it so it really does take an actual event to then take them out of their home.
Yeah. Well, let's see. We've been chatting for a while now. What if we move over to like a recap and some advice for folks here? It's middle of February, 2022. I think that right now we're kind of in a little bit of a lull. Like it seems like this latest kind of like social pandemic stuff is not in the rear view, but we're getting used to it. And what do you think's next? What's your guys' advice as like a future teller for the folks?
I would say keep your eye on consumer targeted mobile robots. Is you both know, for years I did that Tech Trends Future speech 17 years in a row.
Yeah.
I had an assembly of fellow thought leaders that I'd brainstorm with on ideas, including both of you. So thank you for your brainstorming over the years. And one of the predictions that I put forth multiple years that never really came to fruition and was sometimes mocked was that we'd reach the age of the robot in the home. It still doesn't seem to be anywhere near, but there's signs out there.
Yeah.
There's some major companies taking steps. You'll hear more about them over the next year or two. But a robot in the home is not just a robot, that waves at you and brings you something. It's a convergence. It's a convergence of AI, of data, of monitoring, of collecting data on your life. it will solve that problem of at-home health care. It will bring much more to the daily life experience. So I think that's one of the most underrated but transformative events, probably like 5 to 7 years out. But keep your eyes there.
Yeah,
and
there's some really smart people.
if you're playing the stock market, keep that in mind.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you have a word of wisdom, guidance?
You know, I think it'd be great if people actually took an interest in their data and what it might be telling them, right? What it could tell them. And also really broader than that is any of the conceptual things that you hear being talked about, or, you know, a headline somewhere that you think, that'll never happen. Research it because there's an entire ecosystem to that, and you know, the possibilities are really extraordinary if you really dig in and start to look at it. And you know, it might just expand that thinking a little bit of what could be possible and what, you know, new opportunities might open up to yourself, you know, so you don't get behind on it.
So basically, you know, like, I think, I mean, I know I'm a broken record at this point, but, you know, crypto, I think, is one of those things where people are like, nah, I'm not going to
take that one seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, that very much take it seriously. Any, let's see. Well, we've got the self-driving car stuff coming up. We've got the AI stuff coming up. I think from my point of view is it's more like, you almost kind of like with investing, you know, you've got long plays and you've got short plays. I'm going to answer my own question by saying that I think in today's market, you're going to want to look at who to short. You know, like, I'm not exactly sure what the new companies coming out of this change are going to be, but I do know that there's some that are going to disappear.
Yeah.
You know, and like,
Yeah.
I think that that's kind of the thing, is to like watch the tail end of it almost more than the front end of it, I think.
Yeah.
Would be my kind of take on that.
Yeah. One other thought that quite soon will be dated, but as we
current
tape
right now.
this, we're on the brink of, will Russia invade Ukraine or not? If that happens, whatever unfolds, it will be a drone war. It may not be reported that way,
But it will be.
but my hunch is what's really happening is a drone war. You know, because that just
Why
controls
wouldn't
so
ya?
many aspects of that. Technology can now command so many aspects of life in the battlefield.
Yeah, that's and then the natural conclusion is yes, you've got human operators operating the drones, but you're also going to have artificial intelligence operating the drones, and then it becomes a like, who has the best algorithm? Not the best intentions,
Right.
necessarily,
Right.
but who's got the best combination of gyroscopes and AI?
Right.
And it doesn't need to be a big country at all to win that game. They just have to figure out that one better line of code.
Yep.
Isn't that a little odd to think about? That's really what it comes down to.
It's really what it comes down to, you know? And like, that's the world that we're living in.
Yeah.
It's just like,
And
It is.
if you had two countries colliding, and no, this is not based on the current situation, but just theoretically, would you rather have, 100,000 troops, or 30,000 AI-controlled drones in 2022? You got to pick one or the other.
at my
And you're gonna be
control
invaded.
or coming at me.
In your control.
In my
to defend
control?
yourself.
I would still take the 100,000 people, but I'd want to make sure they were all good at skeet shooting. Yeah, because you know, you can pull the power cord, still you can do like a electronic magnetic kind of
Bullets.
pulse kind of thing.
Yeah.
But ask me in 5 years, I don't think that question's going to be answered the same way.
Might not even be relevant.
It might not even be relevant because right now like our human intellect is still building the robots. But the terrifying thing about it is like they can very easily make a better version of themselves than we can. And I don't think we've gotten to that point yet where they're making themselves, the whole Terminator scenario.
Right.
Where they're still under our control, we think.
Yeah.
Or at least we don't know that they're not.
Yeah.
But the natural conclusion is that they might not always be under our control. And they might get real pissed at us by the way we're treating pigs and cows and trees and stuff. You never know.
Right.
Or they might support it and make it even worse or better, depending on who you are. But it's still terrestrial thought, it seems.
Right.
So I wanted to
like the
fire a question at both of you.
All right.
It's 2030.
All right.
You have to pre-book today.
Yep.
You have to book a therapist and a mechanic and a plumber.
Okay.
Therapist,
boy.
mechanic, and plumber.
Yeah.
You got to pre-book today, 2030.
Yeah.
And as you pre-book, you have to choose human or AI on the market for that function.
Okay.
Which are you guys going to select?
Therapist, mechanic, plumber, 2030. Do you want to go first?
We can bounce around.
Okay.
Do therapist
Therapist
round.
Therapist 2030. I would go with AI.
So would I.
I would go with right now with AI, frankly, but not in all cases. Not in all cases.
You don't want the human connection.
No, I do, but I've been to therapy a fair
Efficiency.
amount. It's a lot of one-sided conversations. It's very rarely like a give and take. It's very much of like a help you process kind of thing.
Even one-sided you as the patient.
Yeah.
Putting out.
Yeah. I would say the vast majority of my therapy sessions have been 95% me talking for 50 minutes, which has never been enough.
Right.
But the humans are constricted by their bandwidth and
billable hours.
Yeah, their hours, and you can easily have an AI in tandem listening to 1,000 people.
Yeah.
If you got
pulling data from your data lake to say, oh, did you know?
Yeah.
Your behavior actually suggests this.
And there's a ton of companies that are already doing that. Like Ginger.io was the first one to take all the Android sensor data to predict depression. Like this person hasn't texted or called anybody in 2 days. Like we need to do a house call or a wellness check because their communications dropped or something like that.
Yeah.
So you said it. So then we've got a mechanic. 2030. Well, so then we're working on 2030 cars, right? Is that to say that we're not
Well,
working on
depends.
today's car in 20?
Maybe Alison will be driving a 2016 Beater. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Because I'm a diehard, love to drive.
Yeah, 2016 Beater.
It wouldn't be the Beater, it would be my motorcycle.
Yeah.
I just can't give up the sound.
Mechanic, I would say human, almost exclusively for the fact that I want humans to have jobs too. Like a human's capable of fixing my car.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily need to pay less money to have I'd rather have a human do it.
Yeah.
Just merely because they can.
Yeah.
They can. They're fully capable of it.
Yeah.
So I am leaning towards human, but for different reasons.
Okay.
I mean, one, yes, jobs will definitely need to be supported in some fashion. But in 2030, I could still see it being necessary to need the finesse of a human to, who's being tangible with a vehicle, to then also be, ensuring that the AI is either running properly or whatever, putting the puzzle pieces together properly. And then if there's something that is somehow intangible to the AI, they can fill in the gap on that. Plus, I also think that even in 2030, it's likely that the human is going to need to be actually doing the fix versus versus an AI doing the fix, unless it's electronic and a software update or whatever, but you still have to have humans to communicate that, so, and push an update.
We better land this plane. Okay. And plumber, I'm going to say human. Because I want a human to be able to do it.
I think the plumbing itself will still be so far into today's world that...
Hey, baby. Hey, Tucker.
Yeah. Keith, what are your...
Well, I've never been to a therapist, but I would say AI. I feel more comfortable picturing that. Mechanic, it's interesting because I like an honest mechanic.
Yeah.
I would say human for mechanic, just because that relational trust.
Yeah.
AI should be honest, and a little side point. Every company today should have a technology ethics committee.
Yeah.
Very, very few do. But I can still pick a human in 2030 for the mechanic because I want an honest one, a straight scoop. And then plumber? AI. I just want it done efficiently, quick, and no hassle.
Yeah, I was a little waffly on the plumber part. Yeah, but there's a lot of humans that are really good at plumbing, and we're obviously capable of doing it. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things where, like, from my point of view, I'm really good at computers, and I'm really good at manual labor. They don't pay the same.
Yeah.
But I prefer the manual labor more. And I would hate to see a world where, like, people that prefer manual labor have to do something other than the manual labor, because you can't compete.
Right.
Humans can't compete with robots.
Yeah.
They're not in 2030.
Right.
Right.
You give it 10 more years, effectively.
Yeah.
It's gonna feel like 30. Mm-hmm. The next 2030 is gonna, I think, to our human brains, it's gonna feel like 2050. The next 8 years is going to be wild.
Yeah, that's true.
Absolutely wild.
And unsettling for a lot of people. It'll be freaky and not fun, but for many it will be a wild ride.
There's 100% chance that travel is going to become effectively instantaneous. Like an hour around the globe kind of stuff.
That would be great
Stratosphere type travel. That's for sure happening.
Good, because I'm not a fan of flying. So
well, but
the
I'm
quicker,
just saying,
the better.
Like the globe is going to get so small, and moving so fast.
Yeah.
And like for me, the reason why I like manual labor better is because the day seems to go by a little bit slower, and the gratification is very, very evident. It's not necessarily instant.
Yeah.
Because the jobs can take a long time. But it's tangible. You can see it. It's not like 100 more lines of code or even like another page or 3 or 4 written is tangible.
Right.
And so like I would just hate to see a plumber sitting on the couch mining Bitcoin because they make 10 times more money than plumbing.
Which is what they would rather be doing.
Which is what they'd rather be. Yeah. They're capable of it.
Right.
Yeah.
I think humans need to make sure that they're making their lives challenging in today's society.
Some of the trends we've looked at in the emerging trends class for the executive MBA at GVSU Seedman.
What up, GVSU?
As we look at different trends and potentials, like one scenario that's out there is that the work week starts to plummet.
Yeah.
Because with automation and artificial intelligence, like there'll be a period where there's a massive shortage of manual labor for some years to come. And then all of a sudden everything starts to plummet because AI and automation just tackle most of it. And some of the projections by very credible futurists are that the average work week in the U.S. shifts to 30 hours a week, 25 hours a week. There starts to be more emphasis on leisure, and arts, and travel, and entertainment because our lifestyle pivots in the next 20 years because of those factors. And that's looking way out there in the broad view, but there is substantial research to show it will flow in that way.
Is that something that was partially triggered by pandemic. I mean, so personally, I was surprised that when all of that happened, there was a sliver of me that actually liked slowing down.
I think everybody did, right?
I mean, I don't know. Did everybody? Like,
I don't
there
know
were a
anybody
lot
that
of negative
didn't.
things that happened when and what slowdown meant.
Yeah.
Right. There was negative financial
Yeah.
impact. There was negative time impact for work, but there was something about the quietness that allowed you to recalibrate a little bit or just sit with whatever was going on, and
And
there was something nice about that. But maybe it was wrapped up in the hope and belief that eventually we're going to get through it anyways, and this is like a temporary thing. But it's interesting because it kind of goes back to what we were talking about on the work from home or the hybrid or whatnot.
Yeah.
And the fact that, you have households that everybody's working in. You also have however many kids.
Yeah.
And so life is happening at all hours of the day. And the old pain point of years past that I have to leave work. Is it okay if I leave work to go to the bank today, boss? Right?
I know.
And now, like, the banking hours haven't changed.
Yeah.
But now it's just, you're not there and you go do what you need to do. So it's interesting to hear that because I believe it, right? And I think that it brings a certain equilibrium to actually obtaining a work-life balance eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that'll do it, right? Let's wrap. Let's
Good
wrap her up.
conversation.
Yeah.
Thanks, Spencer.
Thanks
Yeah,
for
thank you,
joining.
Spencer.
Thanks for joining. And we'll wave to the camera.
And
See you.
we got the future figured out, right?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Boom.
Just
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, that'll do it. Hope y'all like the new mics.